I'm Jamie Dimon. I'm the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. I manage $6 trillion in assets, but I'm going to tell you something nobody knows. In 2008, when the world economy was on the brink of collapse, I stood alone in a room, my hand hovering over the phone, hesitating. When that phone rang, the decision I would make would determine the fate of millions. And in that moment, when I was about to lose control, I questioned myself. What if I'm wrong? The story I'm about to tell you is the untold side of the 2008 crisis, the reality behind the leadership maneuver everyone expected from me. Because that night, even the world's most powerful banker was alone, and the decisions I made shaped the financial system you all live with today. If you want to understand what real leadership means, if you want to learn what happens during a crisis, listen to me. Because this story isn't just about banking. It's about how to make the right decisions under pressure. And trust me, you'll have moments like this in your life too. Let me start with this. There's one thing everyone gets wrong about crisis management. In a crisis, your biggest enemy isn't panic itself, it's time. You have no time to think, no one to consult, it's just you. And the decision you make in that moment changes everything. In those dark days of 2008, Bear Stearns had collapsed, Lehman Brothers had gone bankrupt, and it was our turn. But I did something different. While other banks were drowning, we grew. How? Because I saw the crisis coming, and I'll tell you exactly how. Pre-crisis 2007, everyone was getting rich in the mortgage market. Other banks were investing like crazy in subprime loans. My team came to me and said, "Jamie, why are we staying out of this trend?" That's when the real test of leadership began. Was I going to take the easy path, make the same mistakes as everyone else, or trust my instincts? I told my team, this mortgage business doesn't make sense to me. People are borrowing 10 times their income. This isn't sustainable. And that decision saved JP Morgan. But the real test came later. March 2008. Bear Stearns was collapsing. The Federal Reserve called me. "Jamie, will you buy Bear Stearns?" This was one of the biggest financial decisions in history. An $85 billion burden. But also an opportunity. Let me tell you the details of that phone call. Because this conversation determined the fate of modern finance, and the logic in that decision can teach you how to make tough choices in your own life. I told Paulson, "I'll take Bear Stearns, but I have conditions. First, I want a $29 billion guarantee. Second, I'll buy it for $2 per share, not 10. Why was I so harsh? Because the golden rule of risk management is this. If you're taking big risks, you must also get big protection. But there was something nobody knew at the time. Bear Stearns' real condition was much worse than we thought, and when I learned that truth, it might have been too late. This is where I'll share the real secret. The secret was this. I had been preparing for this crisis for 2 years. Not because I'm a genius, because I listened to data, not emotions. While everyone was celebrating record profits, I was looking at loan default rates. While everyone was expanding, I was building cash reserves. While everyone was taking maximum risk, I was minimizing exposure. That's the first lesson of crisis leadership. You don't manage the crisis. You prepare for it before it arrives. By the time everyone else sees the problem, it's too late to prepare. You can only react. So when Paulson called that March morning, I wasn't panicked. I was ready. I had $80 billion in cash sitting on the balance sheet. My board thought I was crazy. "Jamie, you're sitting on dead money," they said. But that dead money became our superpower when credit markets froze. Here's what happened in that Bear Stearns deal that changed everything. We weren't just buying a failed bank, we were buying systemic stability. Because if Bear Stearns had gone bankrupt like Lehman would later, the entire derivative market would have collapsed. $400 trillion in derivative contracts. Gone. But the truly shocking part had not been revealed yet. 3 days into the due diligence, my risk team came to me with numbers that made my blood freeze. Bear Stearns wasn't just illiquid. It was insolvent. The hole was bigger than anyone imagined, and I had already committed to the deal. This was the moment everything became irreversible. I could back out, blame the numbers, walk away clean. But that would trigger the systemic collapse we were trying to prevent, or I could move forward, knowing I might be destroying JP Morgan to save the system. I chose to move forward, not because I was brave, because I understood something most people don't about leadership during existential crises. Sometimes there are no good choices, only necessary ones. Stop here, because this detail changes everything about how you should think about leadership. Most people believe leadership is about making good decisions. Wrong. Leadership is about making necessary decisions when all your choices are bad. The Bear Stearns acquisition closed on Sunday night, March 16, 2008. By Monday morning, the stock market had stabilized for about 6 months. Then Lehman Brothers collapsed and the real crisis began. That's when I got the call that would define the rest of my career. Treasury Secretary Paulson: "Jamie, we need you to take on more. AIG is finished." I asked him one question that changed everything. What happens if I say no? His answer shook me. Then we find out what a real depression looks like. So here I was, the guy everyone expected to have all the answers, making decisions that would affect every American's retirement account, every family's mortgage, every business's ability to operate. The weight of that responsibility was crushing. But this is what I learned about leadership in that moment. Real leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about making decisions when you have incomplete information, under impossible pressure, with no guarantee you're right, and then living with the consequences. Here's the decision I made that no one talks about. I said yes to everything. Bear Stearns, AIG exposure, the whole toxic mess. Because I realized something that night that changed my entire approach to leadership and risk management. Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all. While other banks were paralyzed by fear, JP Morgan moved aggressively. We didn't just survive the crisis, we used it to become stronger. And I'll tell you exactly how we did it, because these principles apply to any crisis you might face in your life or business. First principle: when everyone is selling, you should be buying. While banks were dumping assets at fire sale prices, we were acquiring them. We bought Washington Mutual for $1.9 billion. It had been worth $40 billion 2 years earlier. The FDIC practically begged us to take it. Second principle: liquidity is more valuable than profit. We maintained massive cash reserves even when everyone called us crazy for not investing it. "Jamie, you're sitting on dead money," they said, but when ACO credit markets froze, that dead money became our superpower. We could lend when no one else could. We could buy when no one else had cash. Third principle: your reputation is your most valuable asset. While other CEOs were hiding, I went on television. I testified before Congress. I was transparent about our position because trust, once lost, takes decades to rebuild. People needed to know JP Morgan was stable. But here's the part that nearly broke me. The personal cost of these decisions, the 80-hour weeks, the constant stress, the knowledge that if I was wrong, it wouldn't just be my career that ended, it would be the livelihoods of millions of people. And then my cancer diagnosis came. Right in the middle of managing the worst financial crisis in 80 years, I had to manage my own mortality. The doctor said I needed immediate surgery. The board said I needed to step down temporarily. But I knew something they didn't. Stability during a crisis comes from the top. Any sign of weakness could trigger panic. So I made another impossible decision. I delayed my surgery for 3 months. I managed my treatment around board meetings and crisis calls. I couldn't show weakness, couldn't show pain, couldn't show fear. Because the moment people lose confidence in leadership, everything collapses. This is where most people misunderstand what it takes to lead during a crisis. It's not about being fearless. Fear is what keeps you sharp, keeps you careful. It's about functioning despite the fear, making clear decisions while your world is burning down around you. So far, you've only seen the surface of what real leadership costs, because the real cost wasn't the 20-hour days or the political pressure or even the cancer treatment. The real cost was watching other people suffer for decisions they didn't make. Every foreclosure, every job lost, every retirement account cut in half, I felt responsible for all of it. But this is what crisis leadership really means. You don't get to choose only the good outcomes. You get responsibility for all outcomes, the success and the failure. the profit and the pain, and you have to live with that weight for the rest of your life. Let me tell you about the night that changed everything for me personally. It was October 2008. The stock market had lost $2.4 trillion in 1 week. Retirement accounts were vanishing. People were losing their homes. And I got a letter from a teacher in Ohio. She wrote, "Mr. Dimon, I'm 58 years old. I've been teaching for 35 years. My retirement account has lost half its value. I can't retire now. I'll have to work until I die because of what you people on Wall Street did." She was right. And wrong. But mostly right. That letter sat on my desk for weeks. I read it every morning before our crisis meetings, because it reminded me that our decisions had real consequences for real people. It wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It was families, dreams, futures. But this is what I want you to understand about that period. The decisions that define your life aren't the easy ones. They're the ones you make when you're exhausted, scared, and everyone is telling you you're wrong. The moment when you have to choose between what's comfortable and what's right. The decision no one expected came next. In 2009, while other banks were still recovering, I announced we were going to pay back our TARP funds immediately. Every advisor told me this was insane. "Jamie, keep the government money. It's cheap capital. Use it to rebuild." But I understood something they didn't. Government money comes with government control, and government control during a political crisis becomes political theater. I didn't want politicians deciding how we ran our bank, so we paid back $25 billion in TARP funds as fast as we could. That decision cost us in the short term, but saved us in the long term. While other banks spent years under government scrutiny, micromanaged by bureaucrats who had never run a business, we had the freedom to operate independently. Here's what I learned about leadership from that crisis that applies to anyone facing difficult times. First, prepare before you need to. Build your reserves when times are good. Second, make decisions based on principles, not emotions. Third, take responsibility for outcomes, even when they're not entirely your fault. But most importantly, understand that real leadership is lonely. When the crisis hits, when the decisions matter most, it's just you. No committee, no consensus, just you and the consequences of what you choose. During that period, people asked me how I handled the pressure, how I made those impossible decisions. The answer is simple. I focused on what I could control and accepted what I couldn't. What I could control was our bank's position, our risk management, our capital allocation. What I couldn't control was the broader economic collapse, political reaction, or media coverage. Focus on your sphere of influence and let everything else go. But let me tell you something that might surprise you. The real test of leadership isn't what you do during the crisis. It's what you do after. When the cameras are gone, when the pressure is off, when everyone wants to go back to business as usual. In 2010, Congress passed Dodd-Frank. New regulations, new restrictions. Most banks fought it tooth and nail. We didn't. Why? Because I learned something crucial from 2008. If the financial system doesn't regulate itself, someone else will regulate it for us. And they'll do a much worse job, so we embraced higher capital requirements. We simplified our structure. We got out of proprietary trading, not because we had to, but because it was the right thing to do. And you know what happened? We became stronger, more profitable, more resilient. This brings me to my final point about leadership during crisis. Your response to crisis doesn't just determine whether you survive, it determines who you become afterward. Do you learn from it? Do you grow? Do you take responsibility? Or do you blame others and go back to old habits? The 2008 crisis made JP Morgan the strongest bank in America. Not because we were lucky, because we used the crisis to eliminate weaknesses, build strengths, and position ourselves for the future. We came out of 2008 bigger, better capitalized, and more trusted than we went in. But here's what I want you to remember about everything I've told you. The real measure of leadership isn't how you handle success. It's how you handle failure, how you respond when everything goes wrong, how you make decisions when there are no good options. Most people never get tested at this level. But smaller tests come every day. Financial setbacks, career challenges, health issues, family problems. The principles are the same. Prepare before you need to. Focus on what you can control. Make decisions based on principles, not emotions. Take responsibility for outcomes. And understand that leadership, real leadership, is a burden as much as it is a privilege. When you sign up to lead, you sign up to be responsible for other people's welfare, not just your own. You sign up to make the hard decisions that others can't or won't make. You sign up to be alone when it matters most. I'm Jamie Dimon. I've run JP Morgan Chase for 18 years. I've managed through multiple crises. I've made decisions that affected millions of people. And I'll tell you something. I wouldn't trade that responsibility for anything. Because when it matters, when the system is tested, when people need leadership most, I know I'll be ready. The question is, will you be ready when your test comes? Because it's coming. Maybe not a global financial crisis, but your crisis, your moment when everything depends on the choice you make. And in that moment, you'll discover what you're really made of. That's the real weight of leadership. And if you're willing to carry it, it's the most meaningful work you'll ever do.